I'm going to ask TV if he will come. Let us all stand for the reading of the Word of God. I want us to turn to Exodus chapter 4. Exodus chapter 4, verse 27, beginning verse 27, go through verse 31. I remarked to you a few weeks back about Moses' spiritual journey and lessons we can learn from that. I want to continue that this morning. Because Moses, don't just look at him as a character. Look at him as a person that took a spiritual journey. He wasn't there at birth. He wasn't there at 40. He wasn't there at 80. He was still on the journey. But those journey markers, I think, are very important for us to remark as well. So, Brother TV, please come and read the Word of God for us.
I'm reading out of the English Standard Version, but it will be on the screen also. The Lord said to Aaron, "Go into the wilderness to meet Moses." So he went in and met him at the mountain of God and kissed him. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord, which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the people of Israel. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, and that he had seen their afflictions, they bowed their heads and worshipped.
You may be seated. The year is 1940. England is in turmoil. Germany, like a bulldozer, is taking out Europe one country at a time. Nobody's able to stand before it. Europe has been in a pacifistic mode. The Prime Minister has just tried to keep him at ease, try to slow Hitler down and give him enough and he'll stop his charge to rule the world. He's failed miserably. Hitler doesn't stop. And in fact, by June of 1940, he has invaded France. Britain's allies grow thin. Nobody stands with Britain. France is in battle. America, we don't want to have anything to do with it. We're good. Y'all handle your problems on your own shoulders. England is just a little island, standing against a greater country that is with a great force, taking out everyone who stands in its way. In the House of Lords, a man stood up. And in this time of great trouble, a trouble that would not stop that day, for in a month, bombing on the British homeland would begin. Children would have to be shipped off to be protected from the affliction of air raids and planes dropping bombs all over Britain. This man who wasn't even Prime Minister, his name was Winston Churchill. And he had a word for a troubled people that were facing troubled days. I can't read you the whole speech, but I want to read you just the ending of this. He said, "What General Weygand called the Battle of France is over. I expect that the Battle of Britain is about to begin. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. The whole fury and might of the enemy must very soon be turned on us. Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free, and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age made more sinister and perhaps more protracted by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will say, this was their finest hour. Of course, in a few months as well, that same Winston Churchill would be made Prime Minister of England, and he would have to carry it through its darkest days. We stand on their resolve. We stand on the success of their guard against evil. And for all the reimagining of history that we have, he seems to understand it pretty well. Hitler wasn't representing Christianity. He was representing darkness and evil like the world had never seen before. What's an island versus an empire? What's an island versus evil? He says, there is hope still. Some of you live to see that. All of us should never forget it. But I'm here to remind you that the same thing that happened in 1940 is the same word that we have from Exodus chapter 4. If we can understand, if we can feel what's going on in the lives of the Israelites, if we can understand what's going on in the life of Moses stepping out by faith to do what God called him to do, if we can understand that, then we can understand both the crisis and the cost of faith. What is it? Well, here's what Moses was called to do. We read about that. Moses, come out of the wilderness. Moses, quit tending sheep. Moses, come to Egypt and deliver my people by telling Pharaoh to let my people go. Well, his heart is all aflame with that, isn't it? I got to go do it. God hasn't really given me a choice, has he? So as TV read for us, as he leaves, Aaron meets him. We'll discuss that a little more later. As he leaves heading on his journey, God hasn't let him wander alone. But how often have you read that and really paused at this thing? Now, when we talking about the story of Moses, we want to get to the conflict. We want to get to the good stuff. We want to get to that battle. So here's Moses coming out of the desert. What does he do? Does he get right in Pharaoh's face and says, you let God's people go now? Does he stand up in the middle of Egypt with that great staff and say, okay, I'm going to start bombarding you with plagues again and again and again. Watch as God gets a hold of you and gives you your just due. No. Didn't do that either. He goes to talk to the slaves. He goes and invades the camp of the oppressed people, those who are without hope, those who are without help. That's who he goes to. Because you see, we get the story wrong. We think this is about God versus Pharaoh. And there's things that Pharaoh would learn, there's things that Egypt would learn. But this story is about what God says to his people. This is about who he thinks about and what he thinks about them in their time of trouble. So he meets with these people. And Aaron begins to tell them all the words. I can imagine Moses standing sheepishly behind them, trying to lift his eyes up and making sure nobody's looking at him real hard. This is tough for him. Then the signs came out of this. The signs are wonderful. When you begin to title them, they sound like a bad Vegas show. He brings out the snake rod, the leprous hand, and the blood water. That's what he does. That's what he shows them, the signs that God gave him. But here is the message that all that meant. Here's what all that stuff meant. As one from each tribe, one from each of the various tribes of Israel came together and they had an open meeting. Here's the message that came through loud and clear. God has heard your cries and he has come to your rescue. God has understood your struggles. He has known about your sufferings, and he has come to set you free. See, you don't get that message as clearly in the confrontation between Pharaoh. You see, Pharaoh is representing the devil's schemes. He's representing the devil's fight against God. But that's not what the fight is about. It's not God versus the world. God's going to win every time. But it's God fighting for His people that He has come to deliver. He has pronounced the gospel. He's pronounced the good news. I've come to set you free. The devil has stood up to oppose that will. But don't confuse the message. We confuse it because we love confrontation. We love it today, don't we? Some of us long for it, and I'm not saying with a bad heart, but we long for God. God, come get them sinners. God, take care of them. We get so sick and fed up of the evil that's around us that we just want God to take it all away. We want the confrontation. That's why so many, I think, church folk like Revelation, where Jesus is coming out on that white steed, the swords are out, and the blood's flowing, and the evil's washed away, and that is all true. I'm not discounting. It is true. But we're not in Revelation. We're after the cross. And the cross says, God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whoever believes in Him will not perish, but have everlasting life. We mix God's timetable. We mix His methods. We're waiting for judgment. Oh God, let judgment come out and we'll take care of all this stuff. When God's saying, my hands are stretched out to a people that I long to save. You could see it in 1940 when evil rears its head. I'm seeing evil rear its head a lot closer to home now. How about you? Yeah. I look in the papers and I see gang violence. God help it. That belongs in New York. God help them. But here, when I hear human trafficking, oh, that's got to be way off. Not here. Not here. Violence, murder, theft. It's all throughout the papers, and it's here, right here. Evil is showing its face. Yeah. Evil is assaulting not only the bad people. Evil's assaulting good. It's assaulting those things that we count as safe and as right. But the message that God has sent to this generation, as well as the 40s generation, as well as this generation of Israel, was that I have heard about your oppression. I have heard the difficulties that you've been going through. I see the ramifications of sin. I see the bondage that has come upon your culture. And I have the answer. I have the solution. I have come that you might be set free. Now, my wonder is, why in the world isn't the church screaming that at the top of its lungs? Why are we not saying there's hope in the midst of this trouble? Why are we not throwing open the doors and saying, this is not like a concert hall. We don't open the doors that you may come and be entertained. We open the doors that you may know the Spirit of God is flowing, and all who would like to come in can come near to Him and be received by Him. And if you have any needs, that they can be met and will be met by His sovereignty. Yeah. The words minister to them. But He also gave them signs too, did He not? And it's those signs, perhaps with the words connected, to see that something is really happening. It affected these elders. It affected their disposition. The Bible also says that those who believe in Jesus Christ, that there's going to be signs following them too. And from the early church even to this day, God has healed, God has ministered, God has spoken in new tongues, God has ministered and touched people, not just in supernatural ways, but He's given them hope and He continues to give them life. That's a message that's throughout all the generations, even to this one right here. And that's what we need to say. That's what we need to demonstrate to each and every person, that this is real. I was humbled. I want to put up the first picture. Humbled this week as I looked at the paper and I heard somebody tell me, you heard about the Hodges Presbyterian Church. That's a devastating picture right there. It's not my church. It's not. Our church is intact and whole, thanks be to God. But there's a group of believers met there. And fire departments had to be fully involved on this. In 5 hours, I believe it took 5 hours of hard work to put this fire out. That's what they're seeing this Sunday. That's what they're seeing ever since. That's difficult to see. And I'm not trying to extrapolate messages from events, because that's a higher plane than I live on. But I see this picture, but that's not the only picture. There's another picture, if you'll throw up the second one. This was told to me by Tommy, by others that were there. When they came in, put out the fires and did a walkthrough, because they know how to do their job. They know how to put fires out. They're going to make sure. When they looked at the sanctuary, it was vastly untouched. When the Bibles are there, they're still. You can see it. It doesn't look like anything's. The fire damage is in the steeple. The fire damage is in the front. But the sanctuary is, for all intents and purposes, whole. And my report is that touched some firefighters. I'm going to tell you what that touches, this preacher. God, what are you saying? What are you saying to Hodges? What are you saying to us who have seen this? What are you saying in this, God? If there's some sense we should get out of it. I tell you what I get out of it, that there's still a place of hope even in the midst of the struggle, even in the midst of the war, even in the midst of the happenstances. There's still a place of sanctuary for all who are in need. Yes, the world comes against us, and yes, it hits good people too. Yes, you go to the hospital. Yes, you have bad things. Yes, we lose good souls a lot sooner than we're ready for them. But I'm going to tell you something. God's still here. God hasn't gone anywhere. God's message has not changed. The world tries to water it down because they think they can live off a watered-down gospel. But God says, I've got more power than you've ever seen. I've got more life-changing energy that you've ever experienced. You don't need to water it down. You need it full on. You need it totally whole. You need the whole thing. It will change your life. We want a watered down gospel. We want to make excuses for our bondage. God says, I will set you free. God says, I will set you free. And whom the Son sets free, oh church, whom the Son sets free, they are free indeed. That's not half, that's not three-quarters. They are all the way set free. And I don't want to get too much on it, but God told this to a people. Every single one of them would die in the desert of rebellion. You realize that? All these elders, every single one of them would lose their faith in God and fall in the desert. So it's not like God says, okay, if you're good, I'll give you this message. No, He knew who they were. He knew what they were going to be, but He still says, I have come to set you free. The problem is the people, not the messenger. The problem is the people, not what He has done and not what He will still do yet for us. So I say, God, give us hope and let us grab hold to it. And let us keep from being hindered. There's a couple of sad points about this that I've got to mention. The message is clear. That message is still just as applicable today. But Moses was hindered in giving that message, wasn't he? I rejoice in the message, but look at the messenger. Look at it. Look at the one who testified to what God just told him to say. He's standing behind somebody else with his head tucked because he's too bashful to speak God's words. He's embarrassed. He even knew this was coming. He says, well, God, how are they going to know it's you? How are they going to know that I'm saying the truth? He says, you tell them that I am. That's all you need to say. You don't have to explain me. Just tell them that I am, and that's enough. But he's hindered because he wouldn't speak. He was glad to let somebody speak for him. We got a preacher. That's his job. Oh, I can't speak as well as Sister So-and-so, so I'm going to let her do that. When God gives you a message, you had better give it. Because I'm going to speak for myself. I'm not coming to your job and speaking to people God told you to speak to. And nobody else is coming in your life situation to do what God has called you to do. And He's not called you to condemn. He's not called you to judge. He's told you to give hope to people. Even the worst of sinners. Maybe some of you have heard of Penn and Teller, and I've shared this before. But Teller's not a Christian. He is not. Penn either. They're not. But he says, if they truly believe that there's a hell, if they truly believe that the only salvation is Jesus, Then I want them to come to me and try to save me because they care about me so much. But he just exposed us, didn't he? Well, they're just going to go to hell, and that's what they deserve. That's not our message. That's not God's message. God says, I've come that you may have life. I have come that you may have life. So why can't we share? Why are we so like Moses, stand behind our Aarons and say, you go ahead and speak for us both? And God says, I want you to speak with your own voice the words that I have given you to say. I think also, Moses was not just hindered by his speech, he was hindered by his life. It's an odd little story. It's odd. It's just odd. Where his wife has to come to his rescue right before this and because Moses, who was going to proclaim the message of God, wasn't even living by the covenant of God. He knew God. Oh man, I'm with God. I'm safe. I'm good. But I'm not going to live like it. He didn't circumcise his own household. He was a Jew. He had stood with the Jews, the Bible said. He took his choice. I'm going to stand against the Egyptians and with my people. But he wouldn't even live it in his own tent. It hindered him. In fact, the story goes, God came after him. Yeah, I'll go and do what you want me to do, but I hope you appreciate it. God didn't appreciate it. God said, the Bible says God came to kill him. Because you're going to give my message, but you're not going to live by my standard. You're going to give my message, but you're going to be a hypocrite as you share my message. Now, if God had already seen he's going to be the leader, if the leader doesn't follow what God says, what are the people going to do? If the one that takes a stand and says, I'm not going to live by it myself, what's that going to do to a people who are already not convinced to live it by themselves? He's going to lead many astray. So God gets a little upset. Oh, but God don't do that anymore. The Bible says not many of you ought to be teachers because you will be judged more harshly. Why? Because you're leading somebody, you better lead them well. You better tell them the truth and you better live what you teach and preach. God still gets upset. Why? Because you're misrepresenting Him. You're showing Him in a light that's not true. That upsets Him. But it would upset you too. Let somebody steal your identity and put stuff on Facebook that you're not okay with. We'll see how passively you take that. You won't. You're gonna try to get that fixed because that's not you and that's wrong. God says that's not me. That's not me. That's wrong. So I want you to live and then I want you to share it. That's the only hindrances to the message in this passage. The only hindrances here is Moses himself. Just take a step forward and give his message in your own voice. Just take a step forward and live what you believe. Thank God he married the right woman because she helped him that night. She said, we're going to do this thing right. You are destroying us, but let's make it right. So thank God for the women that know how to do it, even when the men won't. You're not in the back seat. God says, I'm going to use you too. God says, I want you to. Why? Because this message is so important. These men, they're sore, they're tired. They've been working all day long. They're oppressors under the heel of somebody else's whims. And this man, who says he's representing God, says God has heard your cry. And He's coming to your rescue. You think that makes a difference? Do you think that's important, church? We can play it off and say, people don't want to hear that anymore. People don't need that anymore. Let me tell you about an oppressed people, how they responded to it. It says in that passage, when they heard that the Lord had visited the children of Israel, when they heard that He looked upon their affliction, it says they bowed their heads and they worshiped God. They said, that was what I needed to hear. That was what I needed for my day. That gives me hope. That makes my life mean something because God is on my side. He's coming to my rescue. Troublesome days we'll talk about to come. But the message is the most important. And remember, the message did not go to Pharaoh first. The message came to the people who needed hope that had been stripped from them. Would you bow your heads? I'm glad that we can look back on men like Winston Churchill. He's a very imperfect man. Franklin Roosevelt. Our generals, warriors of that hour who says, we're not going to let evil win. We're not. The stand Winston Churchill took just for his country would cost his nation 380,000 people. It was a heavy cost. War's ugly. Physical and spiritual war. And a total, if you count civilians that got caught up in the stand against evil, 450,000 died. We're not going to pretty this up. It's ugly. But he didn't give them solutions. Winston Churchill gave them hope. And you know what? Hope won. Hope fought back. Hope stood still. Hope stormed the beaches of Normandy and says, we will not surrender. We will fight to the last man. Thank God for leaders like that. I won't tell you, in the physical is important, but I think the spiritual is much more important. I'm glad for a message that from Moses to today can be shared. There is hope for you. I don't care how drug addicted, I don't care how sex slave, I don't care how in bondage you are. I don't care. There is hope for you. There is one who will set you free. They don't need to say it with maybe, and they don't need to say it with I hope. They need to say what's been the message of this. You've heard it. I've heard it in both Brother Steve's. I know. Do you know who sets you free? Because if you know that, then you know He's going to set them free too. You know it. If only they will believe and realize, with hands upraised and heads bowed in worship, that God has heard of my afflictions and He's come to set me free. Church, that is a powerful, powerful message. Yes, the church is in battle today. But the message is still desperately needed. Desperately needed. What does God want to show? God wants to show that we're resilient. We stand, we speak, and we stand firm for the truth. He would also like to see people take a step forward, not a step back. He would love to see people who share this message not just from their lips, but from their very lives. Because those lives become even more potent in this generation. Now, I'm going to ask you to stand, and I'm going to ask you if the Lord is calling to you, if He's on your heart, if He's speaking to your life. I want you to come and I want you to say, Lord Jesus, here I am, take me. And these lips aren't worth much. But if you can take Moses' stammering lips, I want you to take mine, and I want you to open a door, and I want you to say, God, speak through me to that person who needs the hope that I have in my heart.